Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we will be talking about the next season of Fortnite. We're going to be thinking about what game mode is FNCS and how, depending on, what game mode it is, how that will impact competitive Fortnite and, even the player base in general. So everything said in this video is just my opinion. It is not a fact. So don't take it as, 100% a fact. It is just my opinion. And if you end up disagreeing with it, then, leave a comment below and we can have a nice discussion. To start the video off, we will be talking about the facts that Epic has given us. Epic has stated that FNCS Trios will continue throughout 2021. While Trios will be a constant in FNCS, we still may alter the scoring and or qualification format season by season. Our hope with this change is to place more stability and consistency around FNCS. So now you should see up on the screen this quote. And then it was also announced that during FNCS Grand Royale, a hype hour is occurring on Friday, November 19th. So this hype hour will include interviews with players, provide analysis from casters, and include a brief announcement regarding Fortnite competitive in 2022. So if we just think about this for a second, they announced for all of 2021 in a blog post that it's going to be trios. But for 2022, they have decided that they're going to be announcing it during a hype hour on the broadcast during FNCS Grand Royale. It could just be something that they just started to do, or it could be that it's just so big that they feel like it needs like its own selection, own little spot. So just by comparing this might be a new game mode in total. So it might not be an FNCS, it might be called something else. Or it could be, something like the World Cup, or it could be duos, solos, and they could just want to have a big hype up for it and then release it. So what if during this hype hour, solos ends up being the game mode that is announced? So throughout all of 2022, all FNCS events will be in the solo format. How would that affect the player base? How will that affect competitive Fortnite? How will that affect the skill gap surge? Will it be pro controllers or end up being something bad for controller players? Like, how does that all affect it? So in total, I would say solos is the hardest game mode in Fortnite for each player. It has the highest rates of RNG in terms of where zones pull, what you get out of chest, if you end up being conned or not conned, stuff like that. Zones being the biggest one. Because if you get zoned in solos, then you're chilling. But if you get max zones constantly, then you'll end up being in like fourth zone with like 600 builds, 800 builds, something like that. Because you've had to rotate from like Camp Cod to like Coral or something like that. So you will have basically no mats. So zones are really big. And if we even go back to the World Cup, I mean, Boga is a fantastic, like, insane player. He deserved to win first, but he did get a lot of zones out of Lucky Landed. And that just, kind of shows that zones are really, really dependent in solos. So going forward, I believe the initial reaction from the player base will be pretty much negative. Majority of the players currently enjoy playing with other people. I often say that solos are boring. I've heard that from my friends. I've heard it from other people as well. It just makes sense, okay? When you're playing solos, you're alone, unless you have other people on call. But even then, they're just kind of doing their own stuff, so you're not really chatting, and it can get really boring while you just sit in a box, wait for end game, and then you end up getting keyed or something like that happens, and you don't have like anybody else there to just kind of mess around with it, have a good time. So I can definitely understand that. But if we think about the player base, there's going to be two main reactions. That's going to be to play BR or not. So we may see some type of a reoccurrence that we saw in Season 6, which was the Primal season, where a lot of players played creative more than they played BR. I fell into this category. I hated the Primal season. I got the champs, so I could only play FNCS, and I scrimmed, and that was it. And I played barely any arena or anything else. I only played creative and like a few scrims in the tournaments. So we might see something like that happen again if it's solos. And then the other, reaction from the player base would just be to play arena and play all that because they keep playing out through the season. So with these two reactions from the player base, the two actions, play BR to not play PR, we also get like a big disparity in skill gap. So, for example, the players that focus on creative may fall behind in terms of game sense and even, realistic mechanical training. Because when you play solos in game, it's always way better than no matter what you're doing in creative. You can become the best mechanical player ever in creative, but if you don't know how to play PR, it won't just automatically transfer over. So that's something that might happen because solos is just such an intensive, all the pressure's on you, it really allows for players to get better. There'll be a huge jump in skill level in solos from the players that do actually decide to keep playing and not just play creative. So, but the biggest thing is that, like I said earlier, solos, all the pressure's on you. You have to figure out your own weaknesses as a player and then improve on them. And that's like the biggest step. That's like the plateau most players have to get over is, finding your weaknesses by either VOD reviewing your own gameplay, VOD reviewing pros gameplay and see how they vary from your gameplay, stuff like that, and then making the effort to change that in game. And that's where the players that grind creative won't have that. So they might become better creative warriors, zone warriors, whatever. Their mechanics may be way better than you, but they won't go through the same game sense, solo mechanical training, realistic stuff that you would have gone through if next season is solos. Another drastic change that may occur if next season ends up being solos is that grinding the champs may be extremely difficult. It was already pretty hard at the start of this season, and we kind of saw that with the first few cash cups because they were pretty stacked, and like a lot of pros couldn't have that key game as much as they could in the other cash cups in the previous seasons, and they dropped like 10 kills or like 8 kills, 15 kills, something like that game one, while in other seasons they would drop like 20, 30 kills. That's just an example of the first couple cash cups being absolutely stacked, and that may be even more the case if Epic makes changes where duos and trios give you fewer points than solos. So how that would probably work is that the point system is the same in all game mode, but the bus fare is increased depending on if you're in duos or trios. So what that may do is that if you want to grind and get better and get arena points fast, you're going to have to play solos. And solos is the most stressful for almost everybody unless you're one of the best, because if you die, it's either your opponent fucked you up or you fucked up, and that's it. And a lot of people don't want to get over that mountain that, okay, I made a mistake or he outplayed me. It's always I lagged, this guy's shit, blah blah blah. So that's going to be really the biggest thing, is that we'll probably hear a lot of people complaining if solos end up being in FNCS and ends up being the best way to grind the champs, that so this game isn't fun anymore, blah blah blah. And that's just going to weed out the people that really don't actually, I don't want to say don't actually enjoy the game, because playing by yourself is technically a totally different game than if you were playing with people, and I completely understand that, but it would weed out a lot of people, and the people that do stay will get a lot more better than the ones that go to creative or end up leaving the game in general. So if solos is introduced, the next map must have a fair number of drops. It must have a good amount of drops, depending on how stacked Epic wants the lobbies to be. Everyone knows fighting in lag is not good for the viewer experience. No one likes, okay, you're watching the replay system, so you have replay system lag, and then you also have, people phasing through walls, they stop moving, we've seen all those clips. I'll throw one up on the screen right now where they're getting shot through builds, getting sniped through a wall, they can't move and they're getting lobby sprayed, stuff like that. So that's not fun to see from a viewer experience or to play in. So for solos, Epic should aim for around 30 to 50 potential drops. 50 drops would be good, or even more than that. They could have like 80 to 90 solo drops, because with solos you only really need like 8 to 10 chests and metal nearby and stuff like that. Stone and wood, you're always good basically anywhere. You just need to find your metal. And even going into end game with 1300 builds and you have 300 metal is okay, depending on other factors. But if we use the current map as an example, we can see that in total there are 56 potential solo drops. Now, some of these drops are super shambles, okay? They're just absolutely shambles, but I wouldn't be surprised if people still landed there even if they were shambles, because it's still an uncon spot. Uncon is always better than con, always. No matter, well, I don't want to say no matter the drop, but in most cases, no matter the drop. So we have 56 potential drops here. This leaves another 44 players, because remember, we have 100 people in a solo lobby, technically 100 teams. So we have 44 other players that are forced to contest one of these 56 drops. Okay? And then, if each drop is contested by one player, that will leave a total of 12 uncontested drops. That means only 12 splits or POIs on the map will be uncontested, and the rest will be contested by one player. And that's if everything's even. Believer will probably end up getting 3 to 4 people, while places like, I I don't know, place like the disco split might end up getting one person. But in this case, we're just assuming that they're all going to be conned by one person just so we can get like a rough idea. I don't think that's that bad. Because if they're all conned, then we'll get the lobby would die like fairly quick. They wouldn't even like assuming that they all con that place like that. You wouldn't even have 70 surge because you would have 44 players, or I guess half of that would end up dying, and yeah. But the biggest thing is that the meta will need to account for not only potential drops, but also mobility. So playing solos without multiple counts of mobility is extremely difficult, and therefore it's heavily based on the zone RNG I mentioned earlier. So because of this RNG, the best case scenario is you have some form of mobility that's permanent. So slipstreams is a great example of that. The cubes and the vents that are currently in the game are good as well. Cars, we had ATVs, bouncers are really healthy for the game, and I wish they would bring them back because there weren't a lot of exploits with bouncers, and it was just like a really good way to rotate, and it was pretty easy to find. So bouncers would be nice, but it's right now, if it was solos in this current meta, it would be horrible because the only really rotates are cars. Well, we have shadow floppers like peppers, but you have to land somewhere that has like noms, finding the llama, or pads. I've already mentioned pads, I can't remember. But all of those mobilities are pretty RNG based, and it just really sucks getting max zone and having to burn 400 builds just to get to a pad, to recycle a pad and go again. Like that just isn't that good, honestly. So if they bring in some type of mobility that is not dependent on RNG, then solos would become even more skillful. And if they keep the meta as is, the winner of the solo FNCS will more than likely be whatever player. So if they keep the current meta, the winner of the solo FNCS will more than likely be whatever player was given the best zones, just like you could argue in the World Cup. Will the solos game mode influence Storm Surge? And I think yes, it will. I think the game mode is pretty big and has a pretty big impact, because if you play duos or trios, and you can have a few keyboard players in there that can get majority of your surge. But if you're a controller player and you're solos, I think you pretty much struggle with Storm Surge pretty often, because you don't really have the same mid to long range, or even long range plus precision that keyboard and mouse players have. You don't have that at all. So you only have a few outcomes, which is you land somewhere contested, land somewhere with an easy W key, or you learn mouse and keyboard for surge tags. That's kind of what you need to do as well. But the biggest thing is that if, the section before this, if there is some type of natural no RNG mobility, that will definitely decrease your opportunities for a good, 3-2-1 beam, bloom fight, or whatever. Because people will be able to use this natural mobility to get into zone and to be set up in a good surge spot. So we might see a big jump in controller players forcing a contested spot, landing nearby and keying, or they might even get good in their mouse and keyboard, or even just fight in mid, like early to mid game or mid to late game right before, and find like a dead side fight. So that's something we might see a big difference of if solos is introduced. So after this, we're going to talk about if the game mode is duos. So what if during the hype hour the announcement is duos FNCS? Well, I believe duos is the healthiest option for the majority of the players. Trios have become pretty stale unless the point format / qualification format or meta is heavily changed. It will probably be stale for 2022. So in order to have an FNCS winning duo, you need players that are good at all roles. They can frag, they can IGL, and they can tarp. Therefore, duos that are near the top will be players that are known for being able to do it all, and not just for their mechanical fighting skills. I don't think you'll see two players that are heavily mechanics and are really good at fighting doing that well in FNCS. I know in DreamHack it's different because the points or the elimination points are awarded more points in general than they would in FNCS, but I think in FNCS it wouldn't really work that well because you'll be up against a lot of other good players. And because of the team size getting smaller than trios, there will be more teams of good players because you won't have 3, you'll have 2. Same as in solo. So the competition and the whole feel of the game will increase because you are losing a player and therefore making more teams, if that makes sense. if you guys understand that. So this may force a lot of players currently to focus on their weaknesses and therefore improve overall as a player. So unlike solos, we will not see a division between the player base. We won't have people playing creative and BR because of the game mode. They'll pretty much be good to go playing trios, duos, whatever. Because duos is still you can still play it with somebody and chill in the call and have a good time, and it's not boring. The divide we will see is between casual and competitive, with the average skill level of a comp player growing further from the average skill level of a casual player. Now, some of you guys might not care about that because you only care about comp, but that is something we might end up seeing because of the fact that the comp players will have to focus on all of their skills, because they want to be the best in duos, and you have to be the best, you have to be good at everything. So they'll have to be focusing on their weaknesses, like an IGL who's not that mechanical, needs to work on fragging or their aim or whatever. And then we have a fragger who doesn't really know how to tarp and change layers and all that, so he needs to watch VODs and learn how to do all that. That's something we'll end up seeing, so that then the next season after that, all of the players will be a lot better because they focused on their weaknesses instead of keep playing to their role. So if a fragger only works on fragger skills, he can only increase so far. But for duos, you need to be good at it all. If we do what we did above in solos, we can use the current map. We can have an idea of the potential drops. So in the current map, we have 47 potential duo drops. Remember, some are worse than you would think. No duo would ever land there, but I'm sure, some would if they wanted an uncon spot. So this would leave 3 teams, because 50 minus 47, 3 teams that would be forced to contest. So in total, there'd be 44 other teams that would have an uncontested drop, which would make for the most skillful FNCS season, because most people will have an uncon spot, assuming it's spread out like that, especially in Grands, because in Grands, most teams will have an uncontested spot, because, no one's going to grind for the entire season and then try their best to elf up a spot. Those 3 teams will probably end up being, that are forced to contest, that probably end up being teams that are near the bottom, that haven't made a name for themselves yet in the competitive scene, so they're forced to contest someone else. So this will lead to most teams being in a good position, as well as most teams leaving their drops at a good time to get surge. So that would also make the surge count go higher, because most teams will be able to leave their spot because they're going to be uncon, they'll be loot up really quick and get to a good spot in zone for surge. So whatever surge is going to be will go up because more teams will be more prepared for it. So this will make the games super stacked, because 3 teams would be missing, leaving 94 up, assuming no one else has fought, early to mid game. Given the audience action in the early mid game, because some teams will 100% need a key for their surge. Because you're uncon, if zone ends up pulling coral and you're a camp god, you're gonna have to 100% find probably a fight somewhere on dead side, because you won't be able to get into that good position in zone because teams will already be based up there. So we'll definitely be seeing, more mid-game fights on dead side, just because some teams won't have enough surge. And the mobility meta won't be as important as it is in solos, because most teams will have a decent uncontested POI. So hopefully they get, a pad, some shockwaves, launch pad, shadow bombs, or whatever the mobility is. Hopefully they get something from there, because they should have a decent uncon POI and be able to farm up and get their loot. So it's pretty chilling in terms of mobility, the skill level, and everything like that. So what if nothing changes? What if all we got was a new map and a new meta or items? The only way that the game would not feel stale is if Epic added something hugely different from the current season. It would have to be, brand new weapons, brand new utility, brand new mobility, and most importantly, a brand new map with brand new POIs. Maybe just keep like the ones that are always been around, like Pleasant has been around forever. So maybe keep Pleasant, but majority of the POIs would have to be scrapped, made something brand new, and then that way it will almost feel like a new trios game, because we'll have new mobility, new items, new shotguns, new everything. So the whole meta would be completely different, but if they keep it exactly the same with maybe just the new map, it will probably be really hyped for the first few weeks and then fall completely back down and be kind of stale again and kind of like, oh my god, trios again, like I would much rather duos or solos. Like, I don't really care this much, blah, blah, blah. Something like that might happen. We might see players that play creative a little bit more than they do BR, because they're like, Jesus, I don't want to go through another, like, I don't want to have to find a trio again, look for a third, blah, blah, blah. So they might be like, you know what, I'm just play creative until another game mode is announced, or just play arena or something like that. But I think over time, a lot of people might lose interest, especially the average to above average competitive players, because they aren't really playing the game to earn. They're kind of, playing for stackers just to get a little better. And if it's kind of repetitive like that, you're really just playing for fun. So, if you're not having fun in trios, then they might fall out. But the top percentage of players, like the pros and the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 pros, will probably always continue playing the game if Epic keeps pouring money into it like they always have. So in conclusion, the biggest change and the healthiest change for competitive Fortnite would be the addition of duos FNCS. While the best for the advancement of the skill gap, so in terms of, what players, the skill level of the total player base, solos would be the best option. And while I think the worst would be trios, I decided to not even bother adding squads into this, because all squads is spamming weapons, dive the box, that's it. It's kind of like a 50-50, or you catch one person out, 4v3, and I don't think squads is a good enough game mode at all, and would be a terrible, terrible idea. But if they did add that, we might see something where we have one keyboard and mouse player with 3 controllers, and that team would be diving boxes non-fucking stop. That would be disgusting. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any ideas, anything you want to discuss about in the comments, or message me on Discord or whatever. But yeah, cheers.